Good Sunday evening. I'm NTV Chief Meteorologist Eddie Shear. 6:37 p.m. on our Sunday. The weather is quiet now, not going to last. As we look ahead to Monday, I'm tracking a strong area of low pressure, and you can see it right there showing up over the Great Lakes. Look at that swirl, classic comma shape to it. This is going to bring snow and wind to much of Newfoundland and some of Labrador as we go through our Monday and even into the mid part of the week. Mainly snow squalls after tomorrow night across southern, eastern, and western portions of Newfoundland. As we jump over to satellite and radar, what you can see, very quiet across our neck of the woods. But backing the view out a bit, remember that image I was just showing you, that big old swirling low? That's what it looks like on the radar picture. You can see some areas of rain and snow working through Toronto, getting towards Ottawa and Montreal. Snow working its way through northern Maine, getting into New Brunswick, pushing into parts of western Nova Scotia as well. Snow's back toward the Great Lakes and interior or central areas of Ontario, if you will. And you may look at this image and you may say, Eddie, we are seeing rain working its way through the Gulf of Maine, getting into the Bay of Fundy. That typically means we're going to see a mix here on the island, right? Wrong. This go around, what we see is going to be 99% snow. The only area that may see perhaps a mix would be extreme southern areas of the Avalon Peninsula. Ahead of this thing, Environment Canada has issued several different types of weather alerts for the island. We have a blowing snow advisory in place for the Avalon Peninsula, the northeast coast, back through central, and then from Grossmoor down through Bay St. George. This area will see snow and wind as we go through Monday, which is why we have the blowing snow advisory. Snowfall amounts look to remain below winter storm warning criteria and snowfall warning criteria. But areas farther south, Burin Peninsula, South Coast, much of central Newfoundland, up through the eastern side of, or western side of Notre Dame Bay, Green Bay, White Bay area, and the northeastern side of the Northern Peninsula, also known as the Northern Peninsula East, is under a winter storm warning because this area will see high winds, 80-90 kilometers per hour, higher for coastal regions, and heavy snows. As we go through Monday, parts of southern Labrador, Red Bay to Lansinclair, Norman Bay to Lodge Bay, also under a special weather statement for some snow and wind, because that area too will likely be seeing, you guessed it, snow and wind as we go into Monday and Tuesday. Environment Canada has also hoisted wind warnings for Parsons Pond, Hawke's Bay, Grossmoor, Corner Brook and vicinity, Bay St. George, and the Channel of Port aux Basques area under a wreckhouse wind warning. Winds along the west coast tomorrow, especially during the mid part of the day, will gust as high as 140. And that's mainly in the higher elevations in areas that see those winds channeling down the western slopes of the Long Range Mountains. Not all areas will see winds that high. Like for Corner Brook and Deer Lake, you'll get the occasional gust nearing 100, but I think for the most part, you're not going to see real high winds. I would say out farther toward the Bay of Islands, toward the edge of it for sure, and the Port-au-Port Peninsula, Stephenville area, you typically see high winds in these situations. You will tomorrow as well. In Port aux Basques, although you're under a wreckhouse wind warning, would not be surprised if you see winds very high tomorrow as well. And these winds are going to be from the east and southeast. As we take a look at areas a little farther to the east, we're also under a wind warning. Avalon Peninsula, Bonavista Peninsula, Bonavista North, and Bay of Exploits. That area will see winds tomorrow afternoon gusting as high as 100. But interestingly enough, the western edge of Bonavista Bay may not see winds that high because there's no wind warning there. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Same thing for the coast around Clarenville and Random Island, but Environment Canada makes the warning calls. But if you're in the Clarenville area, out toward Random Island along the coast, and along the coast of Bonavista Bay, I would also expect winds tomorrow to gust to 100 as we go into the afternoon hours. I see no reason why those areas would miss out on the high winds. As we take a look at Futurecast, this will give us a pretty good idea of when we can expect the arrival of the snow, and we'll also show the wind speeds on here as well once we get into tomorrow. So here we go. Throughout the overnight, that snow moves in, area of low pressure edges closer, but by tomorrow morning, we are still, for the most part, dry with winds just beginning to increase. Snowing heavily back across New Brunswick, PEI, and Cape Breton Island tomorrow morning and even into western Labrador. But across the island, Monday starts off quiet. Why is that important? Means you're probably going to school and you're probably going to work tomorrow. Do not think we're going to have a snow day, especially for eastern Newfoundland. By midday, winds beginning to ramp up, especially along the south coast. Conditions along the south coast, Bay d'Espoir Highway, Burgeo Highway, the West Coast by midday tomorrow are going to be horrendous. We're going to be seeing heavy snow and high wind. I would not travel on either one of those highways once we get through the mid part of the day tomorrow. And even on the West Coast, the snow does start in the afternoon, or late morning, so travel on the TCH is going to go downhill. But the TCH does not seem to be quite as exposed as areas like the Burgeo Highway and the Beta Spare Highway. So certainly keep that in mind if you're going to be heading down that way tomorrow. Winds by lunchtime gusting to 91 Marystown, 68 St. John's, Burgeo 105, Port aux Basques 112. Hence the reason I think there should be a wind warning there as well. Once we get into 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, the snow will have started and will have gotten very intense. On the Avalon Peninsula, it looks like it's going to start roughly between, we'll say 11 and 1 for most of the Avalon, and really through most of central Newfoundland as well. That's when we're going to see that snow begin tomorrow. And it will, hang around through a good chunk of the day tomorrow. Winds pick up, areas blowing and drifting snow. Travel tomorrow afternoon is not going to be good. Maybe the kids will get an early delay, an early dismissal from school tomorrow, but we'll see. I'll take my face off there so you can see the winds in Trepassey. And it looks like once we get into 5, 6 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, the winds are still ramped up on the Avalon and the northeast coast of Newfoundland and back towards central. But after about 6, 7 o'clock, the snow begins to end and the winds will begin to calm down and the weather will really start to at least get a little better Monday night. But that's just kind of phase 1. Phase 2 will be pretty intense snow squalls as we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But the snow tomorrow evening is basically going to go from snowing pretty heavily to doing pretty well nothing in about an hour's time as it ends from south to north as we go throughout the evening hours tomorrow. And it looks like in the metro, it's done by 8, 9 o'clock. And that's really about it, at least for Monday into Tuesday. But this area of low pressure, you can see it swirling right there back into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It's going to basically wind up off the coast of Labrador as we go into Tuesday. This will do a couple of things. One, it's going to bring some very significant snowfall to the coast of Labrador as we go into the mid part of the week. I'll talk about that more tomorrow. But 2, with the winds around the low essentially becoming westerly and southwesterly, we will begin to see some very intense snow squalls developing on Tuesday and continuing into Thursday for parts of Newfoundland. But again, that's kind of phase 2. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. What I want to talk about tonight is what we can expect for tomorrow into tomorrow night. So far as the snowfall amounts go, here's what I'm thinking. And most of this falls tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Avalon Peninsula, northeast coast, back through central, 10 to 15 centimeters of snow. Burin Peninsula, south coast, up through Bay St. George and Stephenville, onto the Buckens Plateau, up through the Topsail region of interior Newfoundland, and the eastern slopes of the Long Range Mountains could see upwards of 30 centimeters of snow. I think the highest amounts are going to be along the south coast and on the eastern slopes of those Long Range Mountains. Corner Brook for you, I'm thinking 10 to 15 centimeters of snow. On the Burin Peninsula, I think we're going to wind up somewhere around 20 to 25. You may notice here, though, on the western side of the northern peninsula, I have low snowfall forecasts. I have a low snowfall forecast. And the reason for that is basically this. As our low wraps up tomorrow, winds are going to be from this direction, from the east or southeast. And what that will do is when we have winds of that direction, as the winds go up the mountain slopes, the air will cool and condense and drop moisture in the form of snow on the eastern slopes of the Long Range Mountains, on the eastern slopes of the Topsail region of interior Newfoundland, on the eastern slope of the Buckens Plateau. But on the western side of the Long Range Mountains, the opposite will happen. The air compresses and dries, so we get lower snowfall amounts, which is why initially I'm thinking the western side of the northern peninsula will not see much snow. But once we get through Monday night and Tuesday, the winds will switch around, and then we begin to see intense snow squalls in that area. But that's basically the forecast for tomorrow. We're going to see windy conditions tomorrow with the snow. Going to be pretty treacherous in the afternoon for most areas starting late morning along the south coast. I hope you found this informative. That's pretty much all I have for you tonight. I've been droning on now for probably 10 or 15 minutes. A long time to talk about a quick forecast, relatively speaking, of course. But stay tuned for updates. I'll have more tomorrow morning. And have a great evening. And I'll see you tomorrow on TV, starting at 5:30. And before then, always on social media.